Thank you for being here. I am Attorney General Josh Kaul, and I'm joined by a number of law enforcement officers as well as some prosecutors. And we're here today to talk about the outstanding work that's being done by the Lake Winnebago Area Multi-Jurisdictional Enforcement Group. LWAM, as it's known, works to investigate significant drug trafficking in the Lake Winnebago area. Among those joining me today, who you're going to hear from, I'm not going to introduce everybody, but I'm joined by Chief Dean Smith from Oshkosh PD, Winnebago County District Attorney Eric Spar, DCI Special Agent in Charge and LWAM Project Director Jeremiah Wincher, and then members of LWAM. So LWAM, as I mentioned, is a multi-jurisdictional task force. It's comprised of investigators from 15 different participating law enforcement agencies within Winnebago County, Outagamie, Fond du Lac, and Calumet counties. We're here today to raise awareness about one of the things that LWAM has been confronting, which is an alarming rise in the amount of fentanyl seizures that LWAM is making in this area. Now, the fact that our law enforcement are making these seizures, that's a positive thing because it means that those drugs aren't being sold. They're not causing harm to people in the Lake Winnebago area. They're not leading to overdose deaths. But the volume that we have seen is a serious concern because we know that while law enforcement is working hard to intercept packages and to hold drug traffickers accountable, that there are going to be drugs that get through, and that puts the safety and health of Wisconsinites at risk. In 2022, LWAM saw more than a 4,000% increase in drug seizures containing fentanyl as compared to 2021. I want to say that number again, 4,000% increase. As you probably know, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid. It was originally designed to assist with pain management, but what's important for people to know is that it's incredibly potent. It's about 50 times stronger than heroin, and it's 100 times stronger than morphine, both of which are themselves very powerful opioids. Fentanyl is extremely addictive, and it can be fatal in very small quantities. It can come in many different forms. It can be powdered, it can be mixed with other drugs, or it could be sold as counterfeit prescription pills of varying shapes, sizes, and colors. Those counterfeit pills are especially dangerous because there is no control measure in their illicit manufacture. Those pills contain varying amounts of fentanyl, and some pills contain lethal doses. Now, LWAM is dedicated to getting fentanyl out of our communities and holding drug traffickers accountable. That is part of the reason you've seen this huge number of seizures. But I want to stress that the opioid-related overdose deaths that we are seeing in Wisconsin and around the country, a major driver of those overdoses is fentanyl. Fentanyl that people are taking knowing that they're taking fentanyl, but also fentanyl that people are taking not realizing that it's mixed with other drugs. Even small quantities of fentanyl mixed with other illegal narcotics can lead to overdose deaths. So it is vital for people to know that if you're taking illegal drugs, you are taking a major risk, not only in taking the drug itself, but with the prevalence of fentanyl, that you're going to be ingesting a potentially fatal substance. Now, one way that we're working to support the fight against fentanyl at the Department of Justice is by requesting 19 additional positions for our Division of Criminal Investigation. We would like to bring on additional investigators as well as some criminal analysts. And so we've made that request in our upcoming biennial budget and asking that the legislature include that in the budget that will be passed in the next several months. DCI Special Agent leads the team at LWAM, and a variety of other projects related to drug trafficking and complex investigations around the state are investigated by our Division of Criminal Investigation, often in collaboration and partnership with local law enforcement agencies around the state, like the agencies you see represented here. Additional DCI staff would benefit the entire state as we work to fight crime, and it would make a difference in communities across Wisconsin. So it's our hope that, first, that we're raising awareness about the danger that fentanyl is presenting in our communities, and secondly, that we will see investment in critical law enforcement services, including our Division of Criminal Investigation, in the upcoming state budget. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to LWAM Special Agent in Charge, Jeremiah Wincher.
Thank you, Attorney General Kaul, and thank you to all of the law enforcement administrators, chiefs, and sheriffs that are up here as we kind of stand together to inform the public about this super important message. As the Attorney General had said, my name is Jeremiah Wincher. I am the project director for the Lake Winnebago Area Metropolitan Enforcement Group, which is more affectionately known as LWAM. What I'd like to talk about is just what we've been seeing over the past year. And over that past year, it's become abundantly clear that while methamphetamine and heroin trafficking remains very serious threats to our communities, the #1 drug threat has to all of our communities that's currently being faced throughout the region, in the Fox Valley area specifically, is fentanyl. Fentanyl, as had been mentioned before, is a highly addictive synthetic opioid, stronger and more toxic than either heroin or morphine. It continues to present a danger to the public, and at LWAM, we've seen an exponential rise in seizures related to fentanyl in the recent past. As I alluded to, while heroin seizures have remained largely consistent over the past number of years, fentanyl seizures have experienced an exponential rise. In 2020, we saw a 62% increase as compared to 2019. In 2021, we saw a 227% increase than compared to the previous year. And in 2022, over 4,000% more fentanyl seized than in the previous year than that. And so far in 2023, we've already seized 295% more fentanyl than we did during the entire calendar year of 2021. And those numbers in 2022 are remarkable, with 4,400% increase than the previous year, 6,300 grams, over 14 pounds of methamphetamine seized in the 4-county area, which is investigated by the investigators that are assigned to the Lake Winnebago MEG unit, by all of the law enforcement agencies you see behind me, and additional agencies that participate in this very dynamic drug task force. An individual and largest seizure in LWAM's history of 12 pounds in one single seizure also happened in 2022. Notably, while we've been seeing this pretty alarming trend, is the emergence of the counterfeit prescription pills that contain fentanyl. That's been at the forefront of this increasing and very alarming trend. They can be manufactured inside the area, pressed if received in powder. They can be manufactured and pressed outside of the area and then trafficked in locally for redistribution. Oftentimes, these counterfeit prescription pills can look like oxycodone or Percocet or any other type of prescription medication, but they're illegitimate, they're counterfeit, and they contain fentanyl. According to data that we reviewed from the Drug Enforcement Administration, approximately 60%, or 6 out of 10 of these prescription pills that contain fentanyl contain a lethal dose, making each pill a gamble, and also making each pill seized by LWAM and all of our local law enforcement agencies standing up here today a potentially fatal overdose prevented and a potential life saved. In addition to that, data from the DEA suggests that a large volume of fentanyl is being trafficked into the United States by the Sinaloa and Jalisco drug cartels and distributed throughout the country. Seizures of these pills have been in all 50 states, and no community is immune from this threat. As Attorney General Kaul had mentioned, LWAM is being a multi-jurisdictional drug task force comprised of investigators from 15 different law enforcement agencies throughout the 4 counties of Winnebago, Fond du Lac, Outagamie, and Calumet. The participating agencies at LWAM, many of which are here today to support this important message, recognize that individuals, groups, and organizations that traffic dangerous drugs do not pay attention to jurisdictional boundaries. Individuals, groups, and organizations make coordinated efforts to obtain illicit substances, sometimes within our area and oftentimes from outside of our area, which are then brought back into our communities and sold on the streets, causing harm to the communities that we all live and work in. This is often done on the backs of individuals who have a substance use disorder, and oftentimes done for large profit margins. Through collaborative efforts and task forces such as LWAM and other partnering drug task forces across the state of Wisconsin, LWAM will continue to proactively investigate those who choose to be involved in this dangerous drug trade and work effectively with state and federal prosecutors to hold these offenders responsible for their criminal actions. This requires effective partnerships and teamwork of numerous law enforcement agencies, as you see today, throughout the Fox Valley, and also the involvement of the public. Human intelligence and public involvement are highly valuable. As the old adage goes, if you see something, say something. Report suspicious activity to your local police department or sheriff's office. Contact drug tip lines and report suspicious activity, or communicate with Crime Stoppers and report that information. Oftentimes, these tips and information aid investigations involving dangerous drugs such as fentanyl and could potentially save a life. I appreciate your time. Thank you. And at this time, I will turn it over to Oshkosh Police Department Chief Dean Smith.
Thank you, AG Kaul and SAC Wincher for being here today, and for each of you for being here today. I also would like to thank my partnering chiefs and sheriff for being here today, because this is a four-county community effort to work through these issues that we're finding within our communities. So I'm going to provide you a little micro view of what occurs in a community, and specifically here in the city of Oshkosh. In 2022, the city of Oshkosh had 13 deaths as a result of overdoses in our community. That's 13 families changed forever, forever with a hole that cannot be filled. The faces of these deaths could be a neighbor, it could also be a friend. It could be a sister or a brother, a daughter or a son. But this doesn't tell the complete story. In 2022, the Oshkosh Police Department investigated 64 drug overdoses just within the city of Oshkosh. In just 2 months in 2023, the city of Oshkosh has had 8 overdoses of narcotics. Just in this month of March alone, we've had 3 overdose deaths here in the city of Oshkosh, which are likely attributed to fentanyl overdoses. In 2022, the Oshkosh Police Vice and Narcotics Unit conducted 88 narcotics investigations, and just in the city of Oshkosh seized $800,000 worth of narcotics. In the city of Oshkosh alone, we seized enough fentanyl to kill 51,000 people. Recently, the Winnebago County Overdose Fatality Review Team published their report for 2021. This report shared that there were 41 overdose deaths just in Winnebago County. It's the highest number there has ever been. 51% of those deaths were just here in the city of Oshkosh. 39% of the population of Winnebago County resides in Oshkosh. We had 51% of the deaths in Winnebago County. Now, this is just data for one of 4 counties. You see behind me representation from all 4 counties that are represented by LWAM. Each and every one of these chiefs and sheriff could tell you similar stories as I'm telling you. This is not just specifically for Oshkosh. This is for all of us. And the partnership that we have with the Department of Justice and with LWAM, it has incredible benefits to our communities, and the support that we're receiving from the Department of Justice is huge as it relates to drug investigations. Every officer on the street in Oshkosh, as well as the agencies that make up the Lake Winnebago Area Metropolitan Enforcement Group, are equipped with Narcan, which reverses the effects of opioids. Officers across the 4 counties are using Narcan to save lives. I will tell you this, if we were not equipped with Narcan, the overdose deaths in these 4 counties would be exponentially higher than they currently are now. Fentanyl is the lead cause of overdose deaths in Winnebago County, and we know what's causing the deaths. As a community, why aren't we doing more? Now, I have a goal, as these chiefs and sheriffs have, to make Oshkosh a place that makes drug dealers afraid to sell within our communities. My fellow chiefs and sheriffs, again, share that same goal for their communities. We care about our communities. Our vision is to make our communities a place that drug dealers do not want to come to, a place that they fear arrest and incarceration. Drug dealers are preying on our citizens, and our citizens are dying. We must go after the drug dealers and ensure that all 4 counties are not a desirable place to sell drugs. We have to stop this. And with that, I invite Winnebago County DA Eric Spar to the podium.
Hello, I'm Eric Spar from Winnebago County. One of the things that's really striking about this is those overdose numbers rising, and for 2020, 2021, and 2022, the number of fatal overdoses in Winnebago County has been right around 40. Previous years, it moved around a little bit, but was closer to 20. So that is a big difference. That really coincides with the prevalence of fentanyl. That is despite all the efforts that you're going to be hearing about here. There are many things that are being done that were not in place previously, and yet we still have those numbers. And that's not unique to Winnebago County. That's around the state and around the country. Communities are facing these same issues. One of the things that has caused for a lot of us, not just law enforcement, but other agencies that are dealing with these same issues, is to really reevaluate what they're doing and are there things that can be done better or more efficiently. And I think that that's resulted in some positive changes. Certainly, prosecutors work very closely with law enforcement, and we always have. But now, with these increased overdoses and the increase that we're seeing in fentanyl, it's prompted law enforcement and prosecutors to work with less traditional partners. So we have, for example, Solutions, which is our recovery club in Oshkosh, has a peer support team that they're putting out there, and they're working with the jail, working with law enforcement, working with us to get additional support to people that are at risk of overdose. We're working with treatment providers. We're working with human services and the health department in ways that we just haven't before because the risks are so much more tremendous than they were. Working with the Lake Winnebago Area Meg Unit, this is a group that specializes dealing with drug cases. Lots of police agencies deal with drug cases. This is what LWAM does. And one of the things that has changed over time is their prioritization. They've really recognized what is the greatest danger to the community, what's the greatest impact they can have, and they've adjusted to deploy their resources in the best way. There are harm reduction measures, so looking at the user side of things. Fentanyl test strips, which were previously illegal, the legislature acted quickly to make sure that those could be distributed, and a lot of agencies around Winnebago County and the surrounding areas are making sure that those are available to people who unfortunately are going to be using dangerous drugs, but now if they make use of them, they can make sure that the drugs that they're using do not have fentanyl. One of the scariest parts of this compared to the risks that drug users had in the past is that fentanyl can be present in things where they just don't expect it. Fentanyl test strips are one way to make that determination and to just assess the level of risk that is there. Narcan and just the increased availability of Narcan is a huge factor in preventing deaths. Again, even though these things are there, we're still experiencing this tremendous increase in deaths, but it could be so much higher. So ultimately, what do prosecutors' offices do to try to remedy some of this? I guess there are a couple things. First, on the side of dealers, kind of like what Chief Smith said, we have to treat these situations more harshly than we did before, because what we do when we're evaluating any sort of case is what is the level of risk that somebody is creating. When we're dealing with fentanyl, that's an increased risk compared to any other type of drug dealing. That means that these are people that need harsher consequences than what we were looking at before. So our reaction to people who are dealing and fentanyl is involved, that results in prison recommendations. There's just not any other alternative for people that are creating that much risk to other people's safety. As far as users go, we have put things in place to try to get more people involved in treatment at an earlier stage. One of the problems with the court system, ultimately when somebody goes through court and is sentenced, they might have a treatment requirement. They might have urinalysis tests through the Department of Corrections. The court process can take time though, and during that time, these are people who are at significant risk for overdose. So one of the things that we've tried to do is get them involved in treatment, get them involved with urinalysis tests to try to make sure that they're clean at an earlier stage. And so we put some programs in place to make that happen as soon as they're arrested and as soon as they're charged with an offense. So I think the big thing with all of this is collaboration. It's all of these agencies working together with one another within law enforcement, but also with agencies that are outside of law enforcement. And we'll continue to fight that fight, and I think you're hearing about the extent of the problem here, but also it's created some unique solutions that we're working on. None of those things solve the problem entirely. We do the best we can with that, but we want to address it as strongly as we can, and I think you're hearing about how we do that. Thank you.
Thank you, DA Spar. Thank you also to our other speakers. Thank you to everybody joining us. One last thing I want to say, and I think you can see this reflected here today, is that law enforcement agencies in the Lake Winnebago area, and I'm confident saying law enforcement agencies around the state of Wisconsin, are unified. They're unified in knowing that fentanyl is a crisis and that we need to raise awareness about it. They're unified in working together to ensure that drug trafficking networks are investigated and dismantled. And we are unified in ensuring that drug traffickers are held accountable. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
I just have two quick ones, if you had a second. What are kind of the factors that are driving the exponential increase message to them as they kind of see this going on in their communities and are maybe, worried about how this will affect, their children?
First, in terms of what's driving these numbers, it's part of a nationwide trend that we're seeing with a significant increase in the volume of fentanyl that's flooding communities across the country. Cartels have gotten into the business of making fentanyl, and it's coming into the country and being distributed in communities all over, including in Wisconsin. That is making up an increasingly large portion of the drug arrests that we're seeing, the drug seizures that we're seeing, and the overdose deaths that we're seeing. What's really important for parents to know and for anybody to know is that because of the prevalence of fentanyl, illegal drug use, which already was very dangerous, is now even more dangerous. We are seeing people who are overdosing in higher numbers than we've seen before. It's happening in cases where we believe people didn't know that they were taking fentanyl. So first, raising awareness about this issue so that people know the dangers if they're using illegal drugs. That's step one. Step two is if people are addicted, making sure that they have access to treatment so they can get the help that they need to fight their addiction. And then as you heard DA Spar talk about, making sure that we are doing whatever we can to reduce harm, including ensuring that Narcan is available, that fentanyl test strips are available. That can also help reduce the number of overdose deaths.
What can we do to reduce the amount of fentanyl coming in from Mexico before it even gets to the
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things we can be doing, and I think we've got to have all options on the table. So first, interdicting drugs before they come into the country is a key step. I can tell you both from cases I've personally prosecuted as well as cases that DOJ has worked on during my time as AG that drugs come into the country in a variety of different ways. They can come carried by people, they can come on planes, they can come on ships, they can come through the mail. I prosecuted a case where somebody had ingested a significant quantity of cocaine. So interdicting drugs where we can before they get into the country is a key first step. A second step is ensuring that we are working collaboratively to dismantle these drug trafficking networks to prevent them from getting drugs to our community. That's one of the reasons that a group like LWAM is so important, because often an arrest in one city may very well be connected to an arrest in another part of the state. Linking them together and being able to not just make a one-off arrest, but to dismantle a drug trafficking organization, that can slow the supply of drugs into our communities. And then in addition to that, making sure that we're reducing demand for those drugs is an equally big part, as people have been talking about today.
Do we have a sense of what portion of overdoses are due from people seeking out fentanyl and what portion are from it being ingested inadvertently with something else?
We don't have data on how that breaks down, and sometimes we just don't know the answer because it's unclear. But what I certainly know from hearing from folks all over who investigate these cases is that there are some people who are intentionally using fentanyl. That can lead to overdoses. But there are also cases where it's mixed in small quantities. And in fact, at the state crime labs where we do a variety of evidence analysis, including toxicology, one of the things that we've done is enhanced the instrumentation that we use to do toxicology testing, because even small amounts of fentanyl may be present. They're so small that they may not have been detected using the older technology, but it may be present in small doses, and it's really important to know when it is because that can lead to overdose deaths, and that may be the most dangerous part of a drug mixture. So we do know that fentanyl is playing a major role, but how that breaks down, we're not entirely sure.
Do you have an idea of, I guess, why fentanyl is becoming more popular compared to the other drugs?
Yeah, and if others would like to speak to that, please feel free to jump in. But what I can say is a few things. One is it's incredibly addictive, so drug dealers use it as part of mixtures that they're selling illegally to keep people addicted. It's also relatively inexpensive for how potent it is. And then because the cartels are manufacturing it, it's flooding communities. And what it's done is put the lives of people in Wisconsin and around the country at even greater risk than they were from illegal narcotics before. Anything you want to add at fentanyl?
Certainly, Kevin. From the standpoint of the why, I think is the question, I would think a major part of that is profitability on an organizational standpoint. Fentanyl is extremely cheap to manufacture as compared to other opioids. As far as that process goes, it's being trafficked in at a lower cost at a higher rate, and I can say that it's not uncommon for the drug unit to go out and purchase what was advertised as heroin, but it's actually fentanyl. So sometimes it's known to be fentanyl and advertised as fentanyl and sold that way. Other times it's marketed as heroin, or in the case that I mentioned before, prescription pills like oxycodone or Percocet, but it's actually fentanyl. Being extremely cheap to manufacture and traffic increases an organization and a cartel level's profit margin. So that is the incentive that I can speak of from that aspect of it. The flip side of it is because it's so potent and toxic, more so than heroin and morphine, it's also more addictive and causes more harm. So you see the results of aggressive enforcement showing, all this, the unity by law enforcement agencies to try to take as much of it off the street as they can, which, like I had mentioned before, each pill is potentially a life saved. So there's value in every single one of those seizures as far as community improvements in preventing harm. But as far as the incentive goes, I would say that a lot of that has to do with profitability. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you in particular to everybody who's standing up here with us and who's joining us in the back there. We appreciate not only your being here today, but all of your hard work working to make communities in Wisconsin safer. So thank you all.